ritual. We do a ritual, the ritual. Rituals, we'll get to it. Ritual, I'll get to it. Under any circumstance that isn't a ritual, I'll get to it. Without a ritual, rituals. Oh, we do a ritual and then gravity doesn't exist. Ritual, I'll get to it. The ritual. Horrific ritual. I wonder if there's a counter for how many times I've said it. I don't know if I've even said it that many times. Rituals. All right, I did just get back from the dentist and they went and jacked my mouth. My mouth feels jacked. So if at any point I mess up a word, it's not me, it's the dentist. It's the dentist. Speaking of, make sure to floss. It's important. Alright, now initially I wanted to explain the power system over the footage of me making the illustrated pieces for it, but there's over 2.5 hours of edited footage, and that footage is at like 16 times speed from the original recordings. And I don't think I have what it takes to yap for that long. So instead, I'm going to flash a montage of the full illustrated power system pieces and just give a surface level idea, a little dip on a chip summary of what's going on here. And after that, after the montage, I'll go in depth. Now, to frame the power system, there are 7 major regions, and they're all fighting over the MacGuffin of the story, which is what I'll call the Book of Providence. So this thing, it's described through like word of mouth, folk tales, legends. No one's actually seen it, but it's described as being able to rewrite reality at an unknown cost. Spooky stuff. So for the sake of making this more digestible, I'm going to appeal to popular content that you might already know. Now, doing this hurts my soul, but I feel like you'll be able to quickly understand the vibe I'm trying to go for if I do it this way. So essentially, some people are born with Naruto-like curse marks, running around doing Full Metal Alchemist-like rituals to find the One Piece. Is this actually accurate? I really hope not, but I suspect that's what you'd see if you glanced at it from afar. Now, contracts are the laws of nature. Think theories and theorems that describe physical things in the world. So the most notable thing that contracts do for the power system is the realization of this organic material. You can think of it as like a new element, and it's going to be called seal. Now, for the people in the world, a lot of their languages have evolved to refer to it in a different way than you would refer to an element. It's a different kind of possession. So instead of he has iron, you would say he has a seal. Instead of, they have iron, you'd say they have seals, plural. If that makes any sense. It's more like a gift to them, like a thing that you possess. That doesn't make any sense. You can possess iron. Well, yeah, hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. Also, unlike our reality, contracts in this world can be broken. Remember, theories, theorems. But it's not like, oh, we do a ritual and then gravity doesn't exist. It's more like we do a ritual and then this massive thing should not be accelerating this quickly. Something's off. Very scaled down. More than likely in a contained space where we did the ritual, not the entire world. And again, I'll develop that idea later. But just imagine contracts as the laws of reality, and seal is described in contracts as this thing that someone can be born with. Now, rituals can break and make contracts. Again, we'll develop that later, but there is a contract, for instance, that it creates the necessity for this thing called the Book of Seals to exist. So there's kind of such a thing as fate, right? In a sense. At some point, something led to a contract being made that compels the behavior of people who have the means of making and then distributing this thing, should it be destroyed completely. And is everyone's behavior compelled by a contract or contracts? Who knows? Actually, I knows, I'm writing it, but that could be interesting. So the main idea here is that contracts are the laws of nature, and they can manipulate and create, and they can be manipulated and created. Like, for instance, they can create the organic material known as seal. Now, seal is described as an organic material that has the chance of being produced in someone or getting inside of them during their development in the womb. Somehow, certain people at various rates across the regions are born with this material inside of them. And by that I mean not everyone in one region will experience the same rate of having seal in them as they will in another region. So it might be that 5% of people in this region are born with seal, and 7% in another region, and 2% in another region. It's not the same across the board. What happens when someone is born with seal is that it can, not will, but it can result in a change in some aspect of their physiology, their anatomy. It's like a mutation. This material will have a reaction with the host, and then some mutation can occur that causes them to see or taste differently. Now, I do mention vessels and brands on this page, which is it's definitely an organization mistake, because you probably don't know what that is. So quickly, until we get to those dedicated pages for those, vessels are just inorganic objects with seal in them. For example, it could be a literal stick with seal in it. And brands are what people refer to as the physical mark on someone who has activated seal. Remember the Naruto curse marks. That's where this is coming in. Once seal is activated in someone, and that has its own page, we'll get into that too, it does react to the skin and leaves a mark. So that's what brands are. We'll talk more about brands and vessels later, but that's how seals are related to those things. And the most important thing to note here is that someone with activated seal in them has a significantly reduced natural lifespan. So I say halved here, but it varies by region. If the natural lifespan in one region, there's a region called Harbel, for instance. So in Harbel, we can say the life expectancy is like 70 years old. And if someone in Harbel has activated seal in them, they'll likely die of quote-unquote natural causes at like 32 to 35. But there's a region called Protea, where seals are much more common. Remember, different regions have different rates of people being born with seal. So if someone in Protea, their natural lifespan could be like 58, and the people in Protea with activated seal in them might live up to 41. So it depends on a lot of things. Ignore the drain from user comment, ignore the grant side effects. I really just came out swinging with jargon here. I guess if I didn't, then it would literally be like a Hunter x Hunter panel of text with a tiny sketch in the corner. I would have had to explain everything. Just ignore the parts you don't understand. We'll get to it. These should get more concise as we go on, though. So the Book of Seals, previously mentioned, is this physical product described by a contract that lists not really details, but details in the sense that it contains the shape of every currently held brand in the world. So once someone activates a new variation or mutation of seal that hasn't been activated before, the contract that describes the Book of Seals will ensure that the shape of the brand on this person, remember that's just the shape that the activated seal makes on them, gets into the Book of Seals by any means necessary. I did not mention it here, but there isn't a book per person in the world. The contract just describes that there's at least one book per region. So a community is made, and their population will eventually reach a threshold that's described in the contract. And so then a Book of Seals will find them in some way, if not be produced by them. Additionally, the language for each book is determined by whoever wrote the entry of that brand shape. So it's not uncommon to see a Book of Seals with multiple languages in it. In fact, it would be more odd if you didn't have that be the case. If there was just one book with a singular language going all the way through it. If the last person with a known variation dies, the contract will ensure that this variation be destroyed from the book. And the logistics of this is complicated because how fast are these books distributed? How often does a new variation show up or an old variation get deleted? Extremely, extremely rare for both instances. But when it does happen, usually a world event will arise wherein a fire might conveniently wipe out the library where multiple books are. Or there could be a heist where someone stole a bunch of stuff and accidentally swiped an outdated book before it circulates back to the original owners and now there's a new entry in it. Something like that. The main idea here, the main takeaway, is that the Book of Seals is a physical thing that holds every currently activated sealed variation in it. Every brand, the shape of it, is in that book. and its existence is protected and described by a contract. It's enforced by a contract. And there's at least one per region, / large enough community. It's updated very, very rarely. All right, we can probably pick up the pace here. Now, vessels, already said it. By the way, I am doing laundry. So if you hear something crazy kicking back there, it's not a person, it's clothes smacking up against the laundry. We can probably pick up the pace here. Now, vessels, already said, but in case you forgot, are inorganic objects with seal in them. I said brand here because a vessel with activated seal will have the brand that it would have made on a person. So just keep in mind, brand equals activated seal. And another thing I didn't put on the page is that the seal in a vessel will activate if it comes into contact with a person's blood. So anyone's blood will do. They don't have to have seal in them. But the amount of blood varies based on how strong the variation of the seal is, or how rare the variation of the seal is. For example, if the variation is really rare, it will require a lot of blood. Just hypothetically, there could be someone out there who sees a really peculiar rock and is convinced that this must be a vessel, and then they bleed to death over it trying to activate it. So the lacing of blood is kind of the first ritual in and of itself that we run into, but we can just refer to it as seal activation for vessels. There will be brand activation later. Also, if there's a stick with activated seal in it, and then the stick breaks, the seal will leak out, which is called seal decay. And this term will come back later in a nasty, nasty way. And I will let you know when that happens. But the vessel cannot be repaired under any circumstance. So, where the part of the vessel has the brand on it, if it's significantly ruined, if it's broken, you cannot restore it. And what does significantly mean? It depends on, again, how rare the variation is. So a rare variation will probably go into seal decay, like a vessel with a rare variation will probably go into seal decay if you get a big enough scratch on it, potentially. Whereas a really common variation will, you'll have to nearly break it in half. And this kind of concept of rarity, we'll get back to it. I know I'm saying that a lot, but I promise it'll make sense. Also, using a vessel with activated seal on it will slowly drain your life. So instead of the brand side effect where your life is significantly reduced straight out the gate, using a vessel will do that slowly. So the more you use it, it's not like an increased rate, it's just constant. Your life will just slowly, your natural lifespan will slowly get decreased as you keep using vessels. So a practical example of a vessel would be a piece of iron, maybe that's placed into a handle to make a weapon, or something along those lines. The iron has seal in it, and maybe once activated, the iron can now cut through material that's much stronger or more dense than the iron is. Or maybe just once it's activated, touching it will give the person touching it a higher sense of sight or smell. So the most important vessel for the power system is the famed Book of Providence. And again, this information is not verified by anything other than word of mouth from the people in the world. So according to the streets, according to the culture, this Book of Providence has 5 unique pages, and each page is a vessel in and of itself that creates the larger vessel that is the Book of Providence. According to them, these pages offer uniquely powerful things in exchange for a great amount of blood to activate. So, much more blood than one person could possibly give up, which I'm sure you can imagine what has to happen there. And once the pages are bound together, they say, with blood and hair, the Book of Providence can be realized. So the most important things here are, what vessels are. The seal in them is activated with blood, and the amount of blood depends on the seal rarity, the variation. Vessels do not give the same side effect as a brand would give in significantly reducing your life, but it does so slowly. And a minor detail that I should add is that you can activate a vessel even if it's raining. So like if the blood gets wiped off almost immediately, the seal won't deactivate in the vessel so long as you just keep contact with it, just physical contact. You just have to get it into contact with blood and then keep contact on the vessel, and it won't deactivate. And the most important vessels are the pages in the Book of Providence, with the most important being the Book of Providence itself. Brands, which the bottom heading should say brands and not brand activation. And honestly, that's how you know I didn't use AI. And you should feel relieved to see that mistake. And you're probably thinking, Bud, we already know you didn't use AI. These drawings are mid. To which I would say, that's kind of mean. A brand refers to the mark that an activated seal has made on someone. We went over that. We're good so far. This mark can be found almost anywhere on the body, and the location of the activated seal, which I'll refer to as brand from now on, again, brand is activated seal, usually corresponds to the ability that you'll get from it. So if someone has a brand going around their eye, you can probably assume that their eyesight is really good. And one important thing to know is that a brand isn't always visible. If the branded person isn't using the ability that the seal gives them, the brand's going to be dormant in a sense. So it's just going to be very faint, nearly invisible to the skin, depending on the skin tone that we're working with. And upon using said ability, then the brand will become very visible. And this is what I'll develop in the next section. This is what happens during brand activation. So brand activated seal. Brand activation is just a process of being able to use the ability that the seal gives you. So the brand itself might not always be visible, but during brand activation, it becomes visible, and then you can use the ability. Now the draining ritual thing is mentioned here for the second time. Ignore it again. I'll get to it. The skin on a brand will not scar. In other words, the skin where the brand is will heal throughout any kind of damage. So no matter the damage, whether it's chemical burns or slashes, it will heal. The brand will heal fully, but the skin around the brand will be affected. A practical example of a brand is going to be the first variation of Mercy. Remember, each seal has a variation. Each variation has names described by the contract that makes the seal. So this brand for Mercy in its first variation can heal wounds in exchange for the target's energy. Energy here is just like anything your body uses for energy. So carbohydrates, fatty tissues if you're out of everything else. And you can imagine someone with this brand touching someone else who maybe got like stabbed or something, and their wound is healing. And while their wound is healing, the person who's getting healed is progressively getting malnourished or something like that. So you can imagine someone with this brand touching someone else who got stabbed or something like that, and then the wound heals while the target gets progressively malnourished or something like that. They get like really hungry and dehydrated as time goes on. Brands cannot, under any circumstance that isn't a ritual, be given. They can, however, be temporarily or permanently taken away. And I listed a bunch of examples where a brand could be temporarily taken away. Ignore everything you don't understand, we'll get to it. Alright, so another example I have here for a brand is the first variation of treachery. So the names that I give them just refer to variations. You can read the details of treachery on the page, but essentially, someone with treachery will be able to temporarily take your seal from you and the abilities that correspond to it upon physical contact. It's not mentioned, but this physical contact has to happen while the target's brand is activated. It's not that easy to steal it, but if both brands are activated, treachery and the one being taken, then someone with treachery can take that temporarily. And the time that they can snatch it is based again on energy, but this time is the energy of the target and the user. So if the person with treachery has more energy, significantly more energy than the target, they can take the brand for much longer. If the target has significantly more energy than the person with treachery, it's not going to be that long that they temporarily can take the seal and the ability. So the main takeaways here are that brand is activated seal, and the ability you get from a brand will usually correspond to where it is on the body. If your finger with half the branded skin on it gets cut off, the brand will relocate to another finger, or the space on your palm below the original finger, and so on and so on. And brands cannot be given without a ritual, but they can be taken away. So they're privileges, not rights, except you can't give the privileges without weird stuff going on. It's a bad metaphor. Thanks to my garbage organization, we've pretty much gone over this subject, but remember, brands aren't necessarily visible on the skin until they're activated. Now, brand activation, here's the page dedicated to it. Again, In case you forgot, brand is activated seal. But an activated brand refers to someone who is ready to use their ability. The seal, so not yet a brand because it's not activated, but a seal will be initially activated through one of two ways. I should have put the initial activation of a brand is usually acquired through one of two ways. But here's the nuance. Either you have a near-death experience or you get put into what people call a sealed forge. And a sealed forge is a vessel that can activate the seal inside of people. But it's probably going to kill you if you don't have seal in you, and it might kill you if you do. So high risk, maybe a reward. So briefly, this process involves placing a person inside of the sealed forge for one night's worth of time until their seal activates and their side effects begin to start, and then you take them out. So back to brands. After initial activation, they can be activated by will. So there's no need to bleed all over the place on the brand or anything like that. It's inside of you. So one detail of note is that brands and vessels can be activated or deactivated without the intent of the person using them. So they can be forcefully activated. One very important detail of note here, another one, is that brand activation after initially activating seal will require light and oxygen to activate. So if it's nighttime, you're going to need to get a lot of moonlight. It's going to take longer because you don't have as much light, or fire, or a lamp or something. You probably have oxygen unless you're underwater. If you're underwater, you're just going to have to separate the O from the H2 somehow. I don't know. And then you can activate it. Activate the brand, which again, just means you're ready to use the abilities. The way you can tell that a brand is activated is because of this mist of blood coming out of the user. So at the side of the brand, once activated, it's very visible. That's one way. But a more obvious way is that when it's activated and they're using brand abilities, a bloody mist will escape the site. You could wear clothes to hide the brand, but the mist is going to give it away once you activate it, and it needs light to activate. So it's going to have to come out eventually. Things of note, brand activation equals brand abilities are ready to be used. It just refers to the process of blood mist escaping the skin. That is brand activation. And the ability is ready to be used. Initial activation of seals is probably going to be through a near-death experience or a forge, after which you need light and oxygen to activate the brand. I would imagine the speed is about to ramp up significantly. So once a brand is activated, the user will, not might, but will, no matter whether they have an additional unique side effect or not, they will experience the stages of side effects here. So these side effects will only affect the user so long as their brand is activated. Essentially, the side effects of brand activation involve bleeding, and the stages are organized by where the user is bleeding and how fast. So with each progressive stage, the bleeding becomes faster. Stage 1, you've got a little nosebleed. Not bad. Stage 2, you'll start bleeding out of the mouth. Stage 3 is the eyes. Stage 4 is the ears. And finally, if you don't deactivate that brand by stage 4, you'll enter stage 5, and that's the brain. So you'll get a brain hemorrhage. Now, the time you spend in each stage can be prolonged by training, which is just leaving your brand on for as long as you can before it's unbearable, and obviously turning it off before stage 4. So, if you can even get to stage 4, you're probably amongst the most proficient brand users, at least for that variation. Also, your physical endurance will also increase the amount of time between stages. That said, you can't just go to stage 4, turn the brand off, and then you're at stage 1 again. Once you reach a stage of side effects, turning your brand off will begin the recovery process, but the time it takes to recover from a stage is basically waiting for the amount of time that you would have spent in the stage if your brand was still on. And if you're at the very end of a stage when your brand is on, then it's going to default to the full time of the next stage. So if you're at the end of stage 1 and you turn your brand off, the amount of time to recover will be the full length of stage 2. Now, we can see seal decay again, and this isn't the nasty part of its return, but now we get context. Stage 5, when you get that brain hemorrhage, is going to result in permanent seal decay, which is seal decay but emphasis on you're losing the seal forever. When you've exhausted the seal in your body without letting it naturally replenish and recover, seal decay happens. In this phase, your seal will escape your body via the bloody mist, And you have however long this stage lasts to enjoy the highest output of power you will ever experience with the abilities that the seals gives to you. Someone in seal decay will have, it's not like just a 2 times increase, it's exponentially greater output of their abilities compared to everyone else, compared to the vast majority of users. Obvious caveat, you're probably going to die once it's over, but you know, because by now you've lost a like cartoonish amount of blood. Lastly, as mentioned before, vessels will not give their users side effects. Instead, the seal in a vessel will naturally run out, and it's not renewable when it's an inorganic material, so the brand will slowly fade as the seal is exhausted over the vessel with the time of usage. So it's gonna take your life from you slowly, and the more you use it, the more you exhaust the seal. It's a finite resource when it's in a vessel. Brands can be empowered through certain circumstances. A more common way is with what people in the world called blood pills. So there's a flower in the world, this is important, and it naturally grows in every climate, but it's got like genetic variations for cold and hot climates. It pretty much does the same thing when you collect it and crush it into a powder. It increases your blood pressure. So basically, if you increase the rate of your blood moving through your body, you can get more output for abilities, with the caveat that you're going to decrease the amount of time you spend in each stage of side effects, as well as, you have high blood pressure now. And this might be the fastest we've done a page. Main point here is that you can increase the output of brand abilities with rituals or blood pills. Brand variations. You saw Mercy 1 and Treachery 1 before, but there is Mercy 2 and Treachery 2 because of this concept brand variation. So essentially the seal in 2 people might be the same amount at the same location of their body, but it will affect them in different ways. So person 1 might get Mercy 1 and person 2 gets Mercy 2 due to genetics or a contract or other circumstances, rituals. But each brand comes with a set amount of variations. Mercy has 4, a brand called Catastrophe has 3, there's another brand called Solace, it has 2 variations. So the most important thing for brand variation is that each brand comes with a set amount of variations, and it comes from how the seal in someone reacts to their body during activation. One unmentioned note here is that the nature of activation can affect the brand variation. So someone who activates their brand through a sneeze due to high sensitivity might get a different brand variation than someone who almost got impaled. Honestly, this page could be 1 sentence, but I'll go over the details. Basically, certain people are born with a certain amount of seal in them, or in a certain location. So the seal, there could be a lot of seal in your pancreas, there could be a lot of seal in your finger, there could be a lot of seal, or a little amount of seal in your eye, that kind of stuff. And the chances of having an amount of seal, so whether it's a lot or few, and the seal being in a certain place are not equal. So just because you have a lot doesn't mean it's going to go straight to your heart or to your head. Just because you have little doesn't mean it's going to go to your hand or your foot or something like that. So brand rarity refers to the chance of someone being born with a specific orientation of seal, so where it is in their body and how that seal activates. That's what brand rarity refers to. The orientation of seal in someone. And the people of this world organize their brand rarity with a certain notation. It varies, but roughly the most agreed upon, the most used notation is going to be this R1 through R12 kind of symbol. So R1 is really common. You could literally think of it as rarity 1. It's very common. Remember, seal is relatively uncommon, and activating it is even more uncommon. But R1 just means this is the most naturally occurring place and the most naturally occurring amount of seal that reacts in this way in someone's body. Whereas R10 is the highest rarity for naturally occurring seal in that amount, in that location, and the reaction that it has when it activates. There is something higher than R10. You can get to R11 through, I wonder if there's a counter for how many times I've said it. I don't know if I've even said it that many times. Rituals or contracts. The R11 ritual I'm referring to is 2 pages away, so I'll have to say one more time. I'll get to it. I will say an R11 brand is going to give the user permanently enhanced abilities for their brand, or it's gonna give the user a permanently enhanced version of their brand based on how they perform the ritual. And no, the user will not be permanently given increased side effects. It's just permanent enhancement, no funny business on the side, except for the horrific ritual you have to pull off. And the example I gave was cozenage. There's a seal variation called cozenage. And keep in mind that you can only get to R11 by means of getting someone who has the same brand as you. We'll get to it. But cozenage, R11 version of it, is just that, but better. Last and not least, but literally the most rare kind of brand variation, or brand rarity, is going to be the R12 rarity. And this is the rarest brand possible. This is the rarest brand variation. It's distinguished by the fact that only one person can have it at a time. Only one living person can have it at a time. The Book of Seals does not have R11 or R12 brand variations in it, so there won't be any way of knowing that someone has this, one of these kinds of brand rarities, until you run into them. And the R12 variation can only be attained by one specific ritual. And this one is specifically made for creating a contract to obtain this variation. And that ritual isn't described in this illustrated power system. And I'm probably not going to go over it in this video because I'm not completely sure on what it is yet. But soon I'll get to a point where I can describe what's going on with it once I figure out what exactly it is. Now, theoretically, someone with treachery can take an R12 brand for some time. But it's like, good luck taking it. You know, the user has to have it activated for you to take it. And I mean, I don't know. I just thought I'd mention it because it's possible. So most important parts for this page, brand rarity is, you get rarity through the location, the amount, and the reaction of seal in the body. And people organize its rarity with R1 through R10, and R11 and R12 are artificially obtained. They're not in the Book of Seals. All right, they're here. The destined rituals, the first of which, I'll go through 4 examples total, the first of which is Invocation. An invocation is basically when a branded user uses some seal in their body to empower a specific part of their brand ability. So to pull this off, user has to do 3 things. They have to familiarize themselves with a now dead language in the world. It's called Crivolet. They have to inscribe a blood and specific characters from this language onto any part of their skin, and this part of their skin must be exposed to light and oxygen. So they have to write it on a part of their skin that's exposed to light and oxygen, and of course they have to write the characters correctly for the intended effect to happen. And 3, they have to activate the invocation. It does not activate as soon as you're done writing it. You have to activate it by will, and this might take a specialized kind of mental training to really tap into invocation. It's not something you can just write on your arm on accident and then you get upset and it activates. You have to intentionally do it. You have to think about it. You have to immerse yourself in what invocation is. And the side effect of invocation is the immediate progression past one stage of side effects. So remember, if you're in stage 1 where you're bleeding out of your nose and you use invocation, you're immediately going to stage 2. You're immediately going to start bleeding out of your mouth. And if you're at the end of stage 1, you're going to go to the end of stage 2. You're going to hit stage 3 really soon. And a quick example of invocation is on the page. This ritual that they're doing in the picture is going to increase precision and accuracy, as well as have an increase to the impact on the target's body. So impact here could mean different things. It could mean like greater healing on the body if it's in the case of mercy, or if there's catastrophe involved, if that brand's involved, you could get snapped in half by a punch if you get hit with this. And the last unstated thing here on this page is that invocation only lasts for one use of an ability. So one punch, like if your ability is that you have increased eyesight, to activate it in the invocation, that is, you need to stop using the ability, not necessarily turn off your brand, but maybe close your eyes. Again, it takes a mental effort to will it. So you're going to have to visualize what's going on. By closing your eyes and then activating it, you can reopen them again. And then, that moment passes and then it's gone. The invocation's off. And the moment will say the amount of time that you can use if your ability is constant, like eyesight, is going to be relative to how much blood you used for the invocation. So more blood, more time. And if you have an ability that's just on and off, You know, any ability that isn't constant will just be a one-use thing. You cannot reuse characters. If you want to use this ritual again, if you want to use Invocation again, you're gonna have to, like, if you want to use the exact same ability, you're just gonna have to trace over the characters that you did, but you cannot use them again. Another I'll get to it raid boss. We've arrived at Draining, and this has been mentioned all the way up there with seals for some reason. I'll just give a little warning, this gets nasty. So the Draining ritual is your pathway to an R11 variation. Remember, that variation and higher can only be attained through ritual, and Draining is going to be your R11 pathway. So you're going to find someone with the same brand as you, cozenage for example, and either their brand has to already be activated, it has to be activated during the ritual, so either they need to activate it or you're going to have to activate it. You can do this this artificial activation by piercing the side of the skin where the brand is and letting blood get out. So this has to happen over a period of time, right? And it's relative to the variation, the seal variation. What kind of brand do they have? Ideally at a steady rate so that your partner, victim, person doesn't die, but eventually the brand will activate because the body of the user is being tricked into thinking that, okay, this is unsteady blood mist. Like, my brand is on, the seal is activated. So it's gonna activate to continue that process and try to regulate it and slow it down. And once both the person doing the ritual, I refer to them as the consumer, and the person getting the bad ending, this is the producer. Once both of them have their brands activated, the consumer needs to drain the producer's blood until the producer enters seal decay. This is the nasty part, where seal decay comes back. This is nasty part 1 of 2 where seal decay comes back. The second part's even nastier in one of these rituals I'm going to get to after this. So this process kind of emulates the natural side effects, but instead of the brain, the user will eventually lose enough blood at the site of the brand, but eventually seal will leak out instead of blood. And this is seal decay in an organic example. So the consumer needs to, I put euphemistically, come into contact with the blood. I do mean consume it, like swallow it. The consumer needs to wait until seal begins to leak out and then drink as much of it as they can. So the more they consume, the more likely the ritual is to be successful. Now, if done correctly, the producer's brand will begin to fade over time. It'll be completely gone, and the consumer will see their brand has grown considerably. As previously mentioned, the producer's brand is permanently empowered, and the example I gave is for a brand called Sacrifice, and you can read that variation ability if you want. Most important thing here is that Draining is a type of permanent brand empowerment that requires 2 people using the same brand, resulting in 1 person with an R11 variation. So unstated here is that not every single brand has an R11 variation, and the only way to find out is by doing the ritual. The nastiness continues. So Blood Oath is when 2 brand users drain one another at the same time. However, the participants of a successful Blood Oath will experience the outcome of the ritual before they get to full seal decay. Otherwise, they'll die. So if done successfully, a new contract will be produced, and this new contract will describe a new ability that exists between the participants of the ritual. That's oddly worded, but essentially 2 people will be able to use their individual brand abilities and a new ability between one another. Like being able to see each other's POV or something like that. Or in the instance of a new law, like, because a contract can be a new law, the new contract that might be produced between them might be the one that manipulates gravity. Gravity could be slightly altered around them when they use this oath ability. So one important detail is that 2 people can successfully complete an oath, where the new contract is that they're not compatible for a blood oath. So you don't die, but the reward you get for this extremely dangerous ritual is that you live with now horrible trauma, probably. I don't know. And attempting the ritual again, should this be the outcome, will result in certain death. So once they've entered seal decay during this reattempt, they will die. They will die. There is no healing on the brand site. That seal will leak out, as well as a lot of blood. That wound will not heal, and they will die. Secondly, the output of the oath ability is affected by the physical proximity between the 2 users. So the closer they are, the stronger it is. The further they are, the weaker the ability is. And conceptually, you can think of a blood oath as a ritual to share the seal of two people between each other. So by ingesting enough seal of someone else, a second sight of naturally renewable seal, their renewable seal, your partner's, can exist, which results in a newfound brand between two people. And this page honestly summarizes the last, but the new information is that the members of the blood oath do not choose the outcome, and that if one user in an oath dies, another member, or the other member rather, will slowly grow sick and die as well. And that's unless they're able to successfully form an oath with someone else in the meantime. This rate of sickness varies from person to person. I put oath to oath, which is technically correct. The type of oath you had with someone can affect how weak you become after they die, depending on the ability you were using. So the example I put here is an oath of sight. And these names aren't described in the Book of Seals. The people in the world just name them as they arise, and it's extremely rare. So there'll probably be different consensus on what each oath has. The people will probably name the same oath to different things depending on, whether they've encountered it or not. And the page goes further into detail about how the type of oath is determined. So you can read that for the nitty-gritties. And lastly, two members of an oath will obtain a new, identically placed and shaped brand on their bodies. That is, right arm, same shape, forehead, same shape, and so on and so on. Main point here is that the blood oath ritual is nasty, and you get crazy benefits from it at the expense of being dependent on someone else for the rest of your lives. The forced vessel formation is a ritual where you can artificially create a vessel by combining the seal of multiple producers and infusing it into an object. Alright, jargon overload time. And I'll explain all of this, we're just listing it out. So the catalyst is the person who starts the ritual. The producer is any branded user whose seal will be fuel for the vessel of reverence. Don't ask, I'll go over it. The consumer is anyone who gets caught inside of the border of the ritual once the first phase of the ritual is done. The vessel of reverence is the prepared item brought by the catalyst that'll get seal infused into it once the contract of reverence is fulfilled. Don't ask, I'll go over it. The seal of reverence is the temporary seal given to the vessel of reverence from the initial producers. The contract of reverence, there's a lot of reverence involved, is the contract that is produced from the completion of phase 1 in the ritual. We're doing great, by the way. So the catalyst collects at least 2 producers, and a border made in their blood will be formed once phase 1 is completed. Along this border, the catalyst will have to mark the mark of the consumer, mark of producer, and mark of reverence. And these are just 3 symbols that have to be written along the border at any point. And this border defines the parameters of the ritual. So once this step is done, that's phase 1. So 3 marks around a border, and then based on how many producers, the border will form and it will connect the 3 marks. You cannot have 2 producers and be ambitious about how far apart you spread these marks. You kind of have to gauge it. You have to be realistic. So the more producers, the larger the border. You need to estimate how large you want the border to be and how many producers you have, and separate the 3 symbols at a point so that a border can form connecting the 3 symbols. That's phase 1. So anyone who steps inside of this border will be marked by the mark of reverence on their forehead. Should anyone with this mark leave the border, they, branded or not, will experience extremely high rate side effects as seen with brand activation, until they either bleed out and die of that brain hemorrhage in stage 5, or get back into the border. Now, more producers, again, equals larger border. Once each producer has entered that state of seal decay, the border will form. So you gotta split them open, get that seal out. And the catalyst has to physically mark the 3 marks: consumer, producer, reverence, along the border. And this will kick off phase 2. So the mark of reverence on everyone will become a mark of the consumer once phase 2 is begun. The border's formed, that is, and seal will naturally begin to grow inside of them. And this new seal inside of anyone with the mark can't undergo initial activation just because of how the seal is interacting with the border around it. So you can just think of that border keeping the seal from activating. And do ignore the number at the bottom header at this point. I think I rearranged the pages. Basically, this new seal in everyone will go towards the vessel of reverence. Remember, that's the item brought by the catalyst. And anyone outside of the border can enter the border and will obtain the mark of the consumer once phase 2 begins. to participate in the ritual. And here, participate just means fulfilling the contract of reverence. Now, this is a contract that is created after phase 1 of the ritual is done, and it describes 3 things: the type of seal that'll be created once infused into the vessel of reverence, the amount of seal that the vessel of reverence needs to get the seal type as described in the contract of reverence, and 3, the variation of the brand that will occur for the vessel. So phase 1 makes a contract. The contract will describe the type of seal, the amount of seal needed for the vessel, and the variation that the vessel will get once the ritual is done. You can think of it just like phase 1 is making the guidelines for the vessel that you're about to create. And the guidelines are, how much seal will the vessel have in it? Because remember, vessels, that seal will decay. It's not renewable. So how much seal will it have? What variation will it be? Where is that seal in the vessel? And how will it activate? So what type, what brand will it get? For example, the contract of reverence has 6 variations, wherein variation 1 will require the least amount of seal in producers. So maybe only 3 producers and 9 or so consumers have to die, while variation 6 will require the most. Honestly, multiple days are going to pass before a variation 6 ritual ends. And you'd be right to assume the higher the contract of reverence, the higher the brand rarity for the vessel that comes out of it. So this page describes catalyst ideation, where if the catalyst doesn't bring a vessel of reverence, one will be constructed, which requires more seal during the ritual. They'll basically picture the vessel they want in their head during phase 1 and hope that the contract that forms is accurate, and more producers will lead to a greater ideation accuracy. We doing all right? We're pretty much at the finish line. So once the mark of the consumer, you remember what that is, forms on everyone's head, the seal in the consumers will slowly inflict psychosis as a reaction. And so, additionally, the contract of reverence produced from phase 1 will compel the consumers to fulfill the creation of the vessel by any means. And that is to say, consumers will most likely start killing each other. This seal that comes out of people inside of the border will make its way to the vessel of reverence to be infused. It'll just naturally flow towards it. And once the condition for the contract is satisfied, the ritual ends, signaled by the fading mark of the consumer and the ritual border. Psychosis will slowly, not immediately, but slowly dissipate. However, if the ritual finds every consumer inside of the border is dead, the vessel of reverence will slowly decay. It'll just emulate seal decay until more consumers arrive. And this rate of decay for the vessel is proportional to the variation of the contract of reverence. So higher variation equals more time to decay and more time to reactivate the ritual. But once the seal of reverence is faded from the vessel, the ritual cannot be reactivated. So once that seal that's gravitated towards the vessel is gone because of seal decay in the contract, the ritual can't be reactivated. But if it's still there, if there's any amount when it's decaying and you get more consumers, you can turn it back on. The border will come back to full visibility, full effectiveness, keeps going, mark of the consumer becomes visible again. And we did it. This is the end. Just a reminder, this is not comprehensive, nor is it fully completed, and I'm sure there are holes to fill. Things change, but this is the power system that I've created for the story, and if nothing else, I'm happy that I put a lot of effort into it. Yeah, some fun stuff that I left out were these people called the Vizdan, who walk around and offer people the Wiseman seal, because the way language has altered over the years. When the Vizdan were normally walking around, they don't as much anymore. But when they were normally walking around, they were called the Vizdan, and over time, just because people weren't recording things back then, they became Wiseman. So these Vizdan walk around and offer people the quote-unquote Wiseman seal in exchange for undergoing a ritual called the Rite of Passage. So that's one. And one other thing that's arguably even nastier than any of the rituals in here is this ritual called the Primitive Harvest, where it's kind of like the Forced Vessel, but consumers have to eat each other. All right, goodbye.